Planet Reddit. Today's story is...
My brother was the golden child until he made one mistake that sent him to prison. What I did with his video game console destroyed my parents forever. Are there more people out there with problems of having a favorite sibling? With parents who favor one child over the other? I would like to know so I don't feel so alone, because it has always been that way in my family. Things didn't always go this way, but over time the dynamic became clear, until I ended up being a second-class child while my brother was the favorite. It started with little things, barely noticeable details, my parents forgetting to save a plate for me at dinner, my brother taking my belongings without asking, knowing that no one would worry when I complained. They never said directly that they didn't love me, at least not at first, but it wasn't necessary either, I could tell, and that was enough. It could be perceived in the way they spoke when I was present, in how my existence seemed to bother them, or in the indifference with which they treated me. I try not to make a big deal of it. Families aren't perfect, right? Maybe I was just being overly sensitive. But this wasn't a case of oversensitivity, but rather that my parents really cared more about any insignificant thing than they did about me. I was a good student, I didn't cause any problems, and although I wasn't perfect, I think I was a good son to them. At least a better son than they deserved as parents. My brother could do whatever he wanted. Talk back to them when they said something he didn't like, avoid housework or schoolwork, fail subjects. Nothing mattered. My parents always found excuses for him. He can't do his homework today because what he ate this morning didn't agree with him, when he had eaten exactly the same thing as always because he didn't want anything else. I often pointed out these patterns because they were worthy of study for any scientist specializing in family behavior. On the one hand, my parents allowed him to do whatever he wanted, and then continued to do so because the consequences were what had placed him in that privileged position. And then, one day, the resentment exploded, but not on my part, but on his. It was a Saturday night. I had just got home from work, nothing special, just a part-time job in a local shop. I worked at weekends to save some money, as my parents never gave me much. My brother, on the other hand, didn't have to lift a finger. Everything he wanted, he got. And I'm not just talking about money, but about the object itself. They didn't even give him the money to go and buy it, they bought it for him, so he didn't have to get up from the sofa where he spent hours. I came into the house, exhausted, and the first thing I saw was him sitting on the sofa, controller in hand, completely absorbed in his video game. That was his place in the world, and from where he ran our parents. A plate of half-finished food was left on the table, and, on the floor, my backpack was open, with my notebooks and papers scattered across the carpet. "What's going on here?" I asked him as I bent down to pick up my belongings. "Oh yeah, I needed paper, I took some sheets," he replied without taking his eyes off the screen. I looked through my notebook and saw all the mess I had caused. My school notes, which had taken me hours to write, had been torn out with his hands, which were also stained with food. I said to him, "Did you really do this?" He finally looked at me. "Calm down, they're just some unimportant notes. It's not like you're doing anything relevant anyway." That hurt more than it should have. Maybe because, deep down, I knew that was how he really saw me. How everyone in this family saw me. "Where are my pages?" I asked, quite annoyed because I was losing patience. He chuckled. "I don't know, probably in the trash." I was used to these situations, as they were like a sport for my brother and my parents. But I don't know what happened that day. Maybe it was the tiredness from work, how I was feeling, or being exhausted from everything that made this time different. I walked past him on my way to the kitchen to see what I could salvage from my notes, and muttered something like, "I don't know whether to look in the kitchen trash can or right here." That's when my parents came in and everything got considerably worse. My mother and father appeared, laughing about something, a private joke between them. I don't know what it was about. But as soon as they saw me standing there, the atmosphere changed completely. "What's with that attitude?" my father asked. I showed him my torn notebook and replied, "Ask him," pointing to my brother. "He ripped up my notes and threw them away as if they were worthless." My mother barely looked at him. "They're just pieces of paper," she said, making a dismissive gesture with her hand. I stared at them, waiting for them to say something like, "That wasn't nice," or "Don't do that again," but nothing. Instead, my brother was already smiling. "Yes, they're just pieces of paper," he repeated, as if he knew he had already won the argument. I turned to go upstairs, but my father's voice stopped me. "You know, that attitude of yours is exactly why nobody wants to be around you." "I'm sorry?" I asked, turning slowly. My mother sighed, as if she was already tired of my presence. You exaggerate everything. You're always playing the victim, always causing trouble. Causing trouble? I replied with an ironic laugh. Why? For expecting basic respect? For not wanting them to destroy my belongings? My brother was laughing at all this and commented, "My God, you're so dramatic." I was exhausted, so I confronted my parents. You act like I'm the problem, but you don't even realize what's going on. You just let him do whatever he wants. My father folded his arms as if to scold me and declared, "Because he's not constantly complaining." My brother leaned back on the sofa, arms stretched behind his head, and smiled as he added, "Nobody wants you here, mate." You'd expect your own parents to have some common sense and finally say something reasonable, but no. They nodded. They really nodded. My mother didn't say a word, my father didn't object at all. They simply stood there, silent, as if they were thinking exactly the same thing, and had nothing to add to what my brother had said. "Okay," I replied. I went upstairs to pack my things and left. But this was not the end, nor are we anywhere near the end, because the next morning, my phone was ringing nonstop with 12 missed calls, and that's when I realized that leaving had been the best decision I had ever made. I didn't answer the calls at first. I just looked at my phone, watching how the notifications kept piling up. It was entertaining. They were calls from my mother and my father. For a family that didn't want me around, they now seemed quite desperate to contact me. I let it ring. I wasn't in a hurry to answer. After leaving the night before, I didn't even have a plan. I had hastily packed my things in a sports bag and left. I stayed at a friend's house, where I had stayed other nights, although now it seemed a bit more permanent. Even he noticed, because he saw me arrive with my big bag. He simply offered me a blanket and said, "You can stay as long as you need." It wasn't even necessary to consult his parents. They were completely in agreement. But there were the incessant calls from my parents. And I had the certainty that it wasn't because they missed me. When the calls finally stopped, some text messages started to arrive. The first ones were just what I expected. My mother wrote, "You're behaving immaturely. It's time for you to come back." My father sent, "Enough of this nonsense. You have to stop acting like a child." Evidently, from the messages, you could tell how sorry they were. But as I didn't reply to any of them, a new message arrived that explained this sudden change from not wanting me around to insistently calling me. My mother wrote, "Come back now, we have a problem." 10, 15, 20 minutes passed and I still hadn't replied. I was curious to know what had happened. I would even have been happy if something negative had happened. But I decided to maintain my silence. Finally, my mother wrote, "Your brother has messed up big time." Have you ever seen that thing in cartoons where a light bulb goes on over the character's head? That's how I must have looked, because I had a brilliant idea. I lay back on the sofa, staring at my phone. So now they needed me. Interesting. I wasn't in any hurry to reply. Instead, I let them worry a little longer. If my brother had really made a serious mistake, then what had happened must be serious enough for my parents, who had never once taken my side, to now be desperately looking for me. After about 10 minutes of silence, more messages started to arrive. My father wrote, "We don't have time for your attitude. Just come back." My mother sent, "Please, this is serious. We're not playing around." I don't understand how this could be serious when it made me laugh. Besides, when my problems were important, they told me to get over them. But now that my brother was in trouble, suddenly it was urgent. I took my time to compose my next reply. "Always exaggerating everything. You should get over it." A minute passed, then another, and then my father called me. I let it ring and rejected the call. A second later, a text message arrived. My father wrote, "You are being selfish with your brother who needs you." I was enjoying it, I'm not going to lie. Selfish, how funny. Coming from him, of all people. Then my mother wrote again, "Your brother has been arrested. This is not a joke. We need you to come back immediately, or at least call us." Well, now I was even more interested. Suddenly, my morning had improved considerably. I told my friend what was happening. He raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure you want to get involved? I thought you were done with them." "Oh, I'm definitely done, but I need to witness this personally." 15 minutes later, I arrived in front of my house. My father was pacing nervously on the porch, phone in hand, looking more stressed than I had ever seen him. My mother was sitting on the steps, her head in her hands. For the first time, there was no laughter, no derogatory comments, just pure panic and silence. Well, some internal laughter on my part. I took my time in approaching them, then said in a carefree tone, "Who wants to explain what happened?" My father turned around. "Where the hell have you been?" I looked at him as if the answer was obvious and replied, "Not here, like you wanted." He clenched his jaw, but before he could say anything, my mother intervened. "Your brother," she explained, "stole something from the wrong people." Now I was really confused. I said, "The wrong people? Are there any right people to steal from?" My mother replied, "Don't be clever. My son is in big trouble because of this." My father ran a hand over his face as he explained. "Some kids at the arcade, where he usually spends his time. We don't know all the details, but they called the police. He's in custody now." I was laughing inside, because when they mentioned that he had stolen from the wrong people, I imagined they would be dangerous individuals. It wouldn't make sense when it came to my brother, but it also didn't make sense that these wrong people were just teenagers playing around. Although come to think of it, the wrong thing probably meant that he wasn't stealing from me. That would have been acceptable to them. But when it was someone who could report him. Fortunately, my parents were no longer irritated by my smile, but they continued to look at me waiting for an answer. Which they got. "And what do you expect me to do about it?" My mother looked at me in desperation. "We need money for a lawyer, something for bail. We need your help." In less than 24 hours, things had changed radically. They didn't want me there. I was a nuisance. But now they urgently needed me, while I didn't need them. Now they looked at me as if I were their only hope. And in a way, I was. I stuck my hands in my pockets with an air of importance and said to them, "So, let me get this straight. You told me I wasn't welcome. You let my brother treat me like dirt. You didn't care when I left, but now that he's in trouble, you suddenly remember that I exist." The answer came from my father. "This has nothing to do with that. We're talking about your brother. He's not ready to spend a long time in prison. We need to get him out of there as soon as possible." I kept smiling, although I tried to show false concern. I said to them, "Are you afraid that some inmate is, well, giving him an unfriendly welcome?" I thought my mother's eyes would pop out of her head. Then she exclaimed, "Please, we can discuss all that later. Right now we need to get him out before the situation gets worse." I exhaled slowly, pretending to analyze the situation. "And how much money are we talking about exactly?" My father consulted his phone and replied, "The bail is set at $25,000. We can cover part of it, but we need you to come up with the rest." Now my eyes opened wide in surprise. 25,000? That sounds pretty serious. My mother seemed a little more hopeful. "So you'll help us?" "Oh, absolutely not." Their expressions fell so quickly that I almost felt remorse. But the key word is almost. "What did you say?" my father replied angrily. I shrugged. "It's not my problem or my responsibility what happens to him in prison." My mother's voice broke. "Enough games. He's your brother," I corrected him. "No, he's your son." And they made it very clear that I was never part of this family. I hope he still has the paper he stole from me yesterday, because I might need it to plan an escape. My father stepped forward, looking at me with obvious hostility. "Do you think you're proving something? Do you think this is funny?" I looked him straight in the eye without hesitation. "Yes, but I also think it's fair." My mother reached out to take my arm. "We'll refund all the money." I took a step back. "Do you really think I trust you? The people who expelled me without a second thought?" My mother's mouth opened and closed without making a sound, like a fish out of water. Her mind seemed to be saying, "I have to say something," but in the end she retreated without words. My conclusion for them was, this is what is going to happen. They are going to resolve this situation without my intervention, as they always wanted. Now I'm leaving, as they told me to do, and I don't want them to keep filling my phone with messages or calls. I turned to walk away. Behind me, my father shouted, "Don't you dare turn your back on us." But I replied, "Watch me." That night I was sitting at my friend's house, checking my phone, while enjoying a delicious burger from my favorite restaurant. I felt calm, silent, the kind of evening I hadn't experienced in years living under that roof. I had my phone on Do Not Disturb mode, so I hadn't received any notifications, but I couldn't resist the temptation to check if there were any. And to my amusement, my family hadn't given up. My mother had sent 3 messages in a row. We can come to an agreement. Please let's talk because your brother is still in custody. We are trying hard to raise the money. Please, I know we were harsh before, but we are family. I almost choked on my soda. Now we were family, now they cared. Now that was ironic. I was considering whether or not to reply when another message appeared, this time from my father. I've noticed that my pattern of overthinking whether or not to reply gives my parents time to write more. Look, we'll pay you back. You just need to trust us. At least you have to admit that they're desperate, because they're really asking me to trust them when they shouldn't even trust their own words. Just when I was about to leave my phone to watch a movie, another message arrived. It was from my mother, but written by my brother. I'm sure he had asked him to pass on his message to me. Come on, are you seriously going to leave me locked up in here? What a question. Because if I were the judge, that's exactly what I would do. But I would probably be benevolent and get him some friendly cellmates. Oh, this just got better and better. These last few hours had been so chaotic and fun thanks to my brother, and I would be eternally grateful to him. So I replied through my mother to let him know when she visited. You told me that nobody wanted me around. I'm just respecting your wishes. Sent, read, and no reply. I smiled to myself, stretched out my arms, and took a bite of my burger. Life was starting to treat me well. The next morning, I woke up to an avalanche of messages. Rubbing my eyes sleepily, I unlocked my phone and started to go through them. Apparently, the situation was getting worse for the family at home. We had to sell your father's TV and golf clubs. Your mother is furious with me. I hope you're satisfied. Please, we don't know what to do anymore. An hour passed before my mother finally let go of her pride and sent another message. Please, we're really going through a tough time. I let her wallow in that despair for a few minutes before replying. I'll tell you what. I'll help you on one condition. She didn't hesitate. Whatever. My response was to demand a public apology in the family group, but one that was extensive and sincere. I want you all to admit every horrible thing you've said to me, and I want you to thank me for helping you. I knew that would break my father's pride. But if they really wanted my help, they would have to humble themselves to get it. And as expected, it took them a while, but finally a new message appeared in the family group. We need to talk about how we have mistreated you. We have made mistakes, and now we realize how much we have hurt you. We deeply regret our words and actions. You are an important part of our family, and we are grateful for your generosity in helping us through this difficult time. It was a rigid, forced, and completely humiliating text for them. Perfect. I sent them a simple thumbs up emoji and went about my day. Did I really get my brother out of prison? Absolutely not. But at least I finally got the apology I always deserved. The following week, I received a call from my brother from the prison. He was grumbling when he said to me, I can't believe you did this. I thought you were a better person. I laughed again like I hadn't done in a week. It wasn't a malicious laugh, rather the kind of laugh you experience when the universe gives you exactly what you deserve. I asked him, better than what? I'm just giving you what you wanted. You told me you didn't want me around, remember? So now you're staying exactly where you belong. I could hear the sound of metal doors closing in the background, until it was interrupted by my brother's voice. You can't do this. Are you really going to leave me here? I let him wait a moment for my answer, because I knew he would have limited call time, which would increase his anxiety, until I told him, you know what? I had considered helping you. I really thought about it, but I was told that they treat you so well there that I decided to give you a little more time. I'm sorry, now it's my turn to enjoy my life, knowing that I'm here living my own way, while you're locked up. Enjoy your stay. When I finished the call, I couldn't stop laughing. I don't know how he got my number, as I doubt I would have remembered it, but I imagine one of my parents gave it to him. Anyway, it doesn't bother me, because it has provided me with some moments of fun. I don't know what will happen to my brother in the end, whether they will get enough money to free him, but they still have to consider the lawyer's fees, which will be an uphill battle for them. I don't know why, but I have a feeling the laughs are not over yet. Update 1. My parents raised enough money to get a guarantor to lend them the rest, so they could free my brother. He still has to face trial for having robbed the wrong people, as my parents have called them, but he can wait in freedom until the date of the trial. That will take a few months, but I wanted to give you an update before then. For those of you who are wondering about my current situation, where I live, and what I will do next, I still have 4 months to go before I turn 18. I'll stay at my friend's house until then, and then I'll have to make my own way. I don't have any elaborate plans because I don't think I'll even qualify for a partial scholarship, so my chances of attending college are very slim. But difficulties have never stopped me. I've survived 17 years with my parents, which goes to show, so I'll find a solution. Now for the funny bits. When he emerged from his confinement, which lasted 3 weeks in total, he was keen to tell me a few things. This update will cover some of the messages and my replies to them. I thought that if I could have some fun at his expense, it's only fair that you should be able to do the same. My brother's first message was, "You'll pay for this. You've left me locked up in prison." To which I replied, "If you've deteriorated so much in a few days, maybe it's because you were already in pretty bad shape when you went in." There are more messages in between, but most of them weren't as funny, or I couldn't think of anything witty to say in reply. Another message from him was, "You should be careful, because I've learned a few things in prison." I replied, "How interesting, but I'm not interested in finding out what kind of experiences you had with your colleagues. And if this was a threat, maybe the prosecutor in your case might be interested, as it would make his job easier to send you back to your new friends, who are surely missing you at the moment." I didn't receive a message from him for 3 days. And finally, look, I know you think you're very intelligent, but deep down you know that not having our parents' love has affected you, and that's why you behave like this. But my response made him stop sending me messages for a whole week. It seems you like to receive affection from inappropriate people. You do it with our parents, who have an unhealthy affection for you, and prison probably helped you discover that there are other kinds of relationships. You should plead guilty and accept all the charges. It's obvious that you miss being locked up with people who showed you their particular form of appreciation. Were these the best exchanges? In my opinion, definitely yes. When my brother's trial is over, I may make another update. Update 2. I don't have any funny messages to share this time, because I eventually stopped responding to my brother. I know they were entertaining, but it has proven more beneficial to ignore him. Now you will understand why. At first, they were messages very similar to the ones I already shared here, but as I didn't reply to him, he lost his temper and became hostile. So I compiled all the messages and presented them to the police. Part of the conditions of his bail was not to harass anyone, precisely because that was what he did when he robbed those people. So when I showed all the evidence of his messages to the authorities, can you guess where my brother ended up? Yes, I can. But can you also guess what happened to my parents' money? If you break the conditions of your release, you lose the amount of the bail, and not only what my parents raised, but also what they owe the guarantor. You can imagine how satisfied I felt on the way to the police station, practically jumping for joy all the way, because I knew the result. As a result, my brother spent more than a month in prison while he awaited his trial date, and my parents will now have to sell many more possessions than just a few golf clubs. I'll comment on that later. First, the trial. My brother was found guilty of robbery, extortion, and threats. With an additional 2 years in prison, he will continue to serve his sentence and look for the kind of company he seems to appreciate so much. I was about to publish this update, but I went back to read it from the beginning and noticed that I forgot to mention my parents and their debt. The $25,000 bail debt, the interest, and the lawyer's fees. The first time they had to sell their golf clubs, now they sold both cars and various items from the house. They organized a garage sale. Among the things they were offering was my brother's video game console, which I thought I could get at a good price. Besides, I wanted to help since it was for a good cause, so I offered less than they were asking for it. My parents weren't happy to see me there, or with my offer. They wanted me to at least offer more than the asking price to help with my brother's bills. I told them I had $100 and was taking a risk, considering the kind of unhygienic hands my brother had when he used it. They finally agreed to sell it to me. Then I went on eBay and sold it for $200, the easiest profit of my life. I feel like I'm on one of those TV business programs. I put some of the $200 back into savings, but I also used my profits to buy 2 of my favorite burgers. And it only took me 1 afternoon to acquire it, clean it, upload some photos, and get a buyer. Thank you, brother, from whatever prison you are in. It is a very special gift you have given me, and I know it has come from the bottom of your heart, which makes it even more valuable. I will treasure it all my life.